Hello and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you very much for joining this session today, Your Strategic Supply Chain. Hope you all enjoyed Gary's keynote speech here last hour. And we have some exciting stuff to deliver to you today, and we're really excited to share some stories from a few customers of TraceGains and their experiences. But before we kind of get into some of that stuff, I do want to have some housekeeping notes. Please put all your chats in the chat box to the right of the screen. The theater mode is a button just below the video screen that you can use that actually allows you to view the video and see the questions coming through. In that same chat box, you're able to also take a poll. And so we have a few poll questions that we'd love for all of you attendees to answer as we move along this session. We're going to try at the end to leave about 10-15 minutes or so for Q&A. So just whenever you think of a question, pop it in the chat box. We're going to keep tabs on all the questions. We're going to do our best to address them directly on this session. However, if we aren't able to get to any of them, we'll be sure to circle back with any other lingering questions for TraceGains folks or anybody on the panel. So again, my name is James Yarbrough. I'm Senior Account Executive here at TraceGains, and I'm going to be moderating today. But really the exciting part is to hear from some of our users, whether they're current users of TraceGains or past users, and really their experiences. So I hope this provides a lot of value for everyone on the call. So from Nature's Way, we have Sarah Hazard, who's going to tell her story a little bit on how they're sourcing and getting ingredients and suppliers approved quicker. We have Jared Kiefer, who's Director of Safety and Regulatory Compliance at URM Stores, and Jared's going to tell a few stories and tips and tricks on how their organization was able to really onboard their suppliers in a much more efficient manner and be very successful in that. Then we have Kelly Surprise. So Kelly currently is a food safety and quality consultant. However, Kelly and I go back a few years because she used to work for a customer of TraceGains who still uses TraceGains and has some really unique tips, tricks, and insights on how to look at risk and bring that into your supply chain management and so on and so forth. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to Sarah to run through her portion of the presentation.
Hey, thanks, James, and thank you to TraceGains for inviting me to be part of this panel today. There we go. So for those of you not familiar, sorry, Helen, the slides are not advanced. There we go. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Nature's Way, we are a dietary supplement and drug manufacturer based in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Our product portfolio consists of multivitamins, probiotics, cold and flu, which have been in very high demand in recent months, and a large portfolio of herbal ingredients as well as some homeopathics. That said, we've been working with TraceGains since about early 2019, so not all that long. Many of you on this panel have probably been using TraceGains longer, but we were really one of the first supplement companies to engage with the platform. So over the next few minutes, I just want to take you through really our decision to select TraceGains, the TraceGains platform, how we really got here, and how we're using it to simplify some of our supply chain processes, namely our sourcing and qualification process. And I do want to end with a little hurrah for Market Hub. So believe it or not, there was a time when we collected very little information from our supply chain about our suppliers and about the items we were buying from them, or at least so I hear from my more senior colleagues within the organization. But as the regulatory landscape has evolved over the years, right, not just the DS industry, but also in the food industry, we've all began collecting more and more information to comply with those regs and requirements. And oddly enough, there was a time when we collected that information on paper forms. Sometimes those were snail mailed to our organizations, faxed in some cases. I still like going through the archives here. And ultimately those records are reviewed and stored in a filing cabinet, or and we all know that when data is stored in a filing cabinet, right, it's not really useful for the rest of the organization. It's not easy to access in this very remote world we now live in. And it has really little to no connectivity to other information systems, ERP systems our organizations are using. So it also, poses a huge compliance challenge because folks aren't easily, that data is not easily accessible. Oops, sorry. So over the years, right, we took that data from paper and we tried to digitize it by putting it in spreadsheets, thinking it was going to be more useful for our organization. But people would then question the accuracy and again, the connectivity to other systems we were using. So really at the end of the day, our data was managing us, right? And this data has an impact on the safety, quality, and efficacy of our finished product. So it's critical data. So we made the decision about 4 years ago to implement a product lifecycle management system to start to put that data to work for us and really enhance our compliance programs. And during the implementation process, right, we spent significant time evaluating what data we really needed from our suppliers, about them and the items we purchased from them. And we really recognized in many cases we were asking for more data than we actually needed. And so if any of our suppliers are on this call or on this panel, I am sorry. We also really spent a lot of time standardizing how that data was stored or maintained, so that as an organization, we were talking about that data the same way and we all knew what it meant. You know, and lastly, we really wanted to reduce redundancy. We had multiple information systems. In some cases, we were dual maintaining data from our suppliers in those systems. So a big goal of that project was to reduce redundancy. We did implement that. We went live with that system in 2017, and we really realized some immense time savings by doing this. To give you an example, a label review for a multivitamin may have taken us 8 hours previously because we were validating data either through spreadsheets or file drives, electronic files. And now that review took less than 30 minutes because the data was being validated by the system, you know, by the data we were maintaining within the system. The issue we were still facing, though, even after all that implementation of the very expensive software, was that it was still taking us a long time to collect that information from our suppliers, right? That data had to come from somewhere, and typically the majority of it comes from our supply base. So we all knew sourcing and qualification took time. I think most people know this. We also know what we have to do these, right? This is a regulatory requirement that we do some of these projects and processes. But through some data crunching and continuous improvement events, we realized we weren't doing compliance with efficiency. And so our most significant barrier really to innovation at the time was the time it was taking us to source and qualify suppliers. And in some cases, that process was taking us 3 to 6+ months. And you know, I hope nobody's like, wow, that's crazy. You guys are nuts. But it took us a lot of time to collect that information. So we started looking at the sourcing and qualification process. And for those of you familiar with any lean symbols, right, you're very familiar with the symbol of stop, wait, delay. And there's a lot of that in the sourcing process. So these bullet points here just are to reflect some of the key steps, I would say, in sourcing and qualification. For starters, we know it takes time to find suppliers, right? In a normal year, BC or before COVID, we all would have put on a ton of miles at trade shows trying to meet new or potential suppliers. We would have been doing supplier visits, a lot more travel than probably most of us are doing right now. Our procurement and sourcing team, once we find a supplier, takes some time to establish connections with that organization. Sometimes that can take up to 2 weeks. It can take another few weeks for legal to execute any agreements to even obtain basic information we need from that organization to determine if a business relationship is even possible. And I'm giving legal a little bit more credit here because 2 to 3 weeks seems kind of fast. But we all know then it can take suppliers time to prepare samples, right? They may be readily available. They may need to prototype them. They may need to ship them here from other countries. And during COVID, I'm sure none of us experienced any shipping delays. So it can take time for that as well. And I think most of us participating in TGCon this week are probably acutely aware of the time it takes to prepare and collect documentation from suppliers, from, across the supply chain. And historically, questionnaires haven't been standardized, at least in our industry. There were some customers who were using the CD protocol developed by CRN, which was standardized information for dietary ingredients. But most customers like us were customizing what we needed. We were asking for more documentation than what was being required in those protocols. And so again, suppliers needed time to prepare and compile that information. If the item was new for your supplier, if they're a new supplier for you, they simply need that time. We have some suppliers who complete almost 20,000 questionnaires a year. So we recognize that can take 20 to 60+ days because they may be collecting that information from their supply chain. So from there, right, samples and documentation are evaluated and that game of email volleyball begins. We, back and forth until all questions are resolved. And then risk assessments may necessitate the need for an on-site audit. And you can go through all of this activity and there may be no red flags, no issues, and things can proceed. Or red flags may, there may be an issue there and the process needs to start over, or all of that effort could be for naught, because in the end it was determined either the supplier or the item was not a fit for the needs of the business. So when we looked at why it was taking us so long, and as with most transactional processes, we were spending a lot of time waiting, as we were kind of talked about before, and over processing. So those of you familiar with any of the Lean Six Sigma, 8 wastes, right? Waiting and over processing were our 2 biggest wastes. So again, we were waiting for purchasing to find suppliers, waiting for samples, waiting for docs, waiting. Or our suppliers may have been waiting for us to make some decisions, because customers can be difficult too. And when it comes to over processing, we were asking, again, we're asking for more information than we actually needed. So did we really need a BSE, TSE statement on an ingredient that contained no components of animal origin? Probably not. But again, over the years, if we received questions from a customer or customer service received questions, we typically add it to our questionnaire so that way we were over prepared to answer that question should we ever get it again. And then over time, our entire industry was asking for just ever so slightly different information. And really, TraceGains has helped with these 2 particular forms of waste, right? The platform is really designed to remove wait time, right? By allowing our suppliers to put that data at our fingertips once we make that connection in TraceGains, and they've really created a standardized way for us to share information through the use of the standard TG forms. So after we implemented PLM, we had shopped some other software solutions, but we did end up working with the TraceGains platform, really because it checked a lot of the boxes for the things we were looking for in a software program to help bridge this gap between our product lifecycle management system and our supply base. And just to kind of recap some of those things we were really looking for and what TG really brought to the table was, first and foremost, cannot talk about standardizing data or information collection enough, but we really wanted our suppliers to know what we were asking for every time, and we wanted those in our organization to also know how to find and access that information. Regarding expiration tracking, our human resources are extremely valuable, more now than ever, and we didn't want our associates' time spent scouring file drives and Excel spreadsheets to try to figure out when documents were due to expire. So this was a really important feature for us to just eliminate some of the time that was spent on those maintenance activities. And really, our time can now be spent focusing on what changes have been made. Regarding the user interface, with some software systems, it can feel like you have to learn a new language in order to use them. So the TG interface is very easy to use. It's very intuitive, and that was very, very important for us. Customization, those of us who have to submit IT tickets every time we want a change made to some information system can be very painful. So we wanted this to be pretty agile solutions that we could make changes on the fly as we needed to. And also, so TraceGains has allowed us to do that, and it's been very helpful. Cost is obviously very important. There are some software solutions out there charging at least $1,000 per user license. And cost to supplier is free, right? It's free to use. That was very, very important as we implemented TraceGains. And finally, it had to be able to integrate with other IT systems. We spent a lot of time entering data into this product lifecycle management system, and the fact that TG has, can build in APIs to integrate and reduce some of that data entry pain points, so that way our whole supply chain isn't just continuing to transpose data over and over and over again. So again, we've been using TG since about early 2019, and we have about 45% of our existing suppliers connected in the portal, and that number is not going to seem significant after Jared shares his onboarding successes here in a few minutes, but it's been a really great solution for us. And I just want to share some of the sort of key successes again, just to sort of reiterate how important it's been. First off, it's been very easy to establish connections with suppliers, right? We know who to contact, we know who to solicit information from. We're able to review and information made accessible via Market Hub, which has been very, very important for our product development and sourcing teams as they're just kind of searching Market Hub for, hey, I'm looking for maltodextrin. They can sort of peruse those spec sheets to see if it's something they're interested in. Again, easy comparisons for R&D and really, really easy to request samples for bench work and R&D work. When, again, I'm sorry I keep using the word, but standardized documentation and questionnaire requirements, right? Documents aren't becoming lost in our inboxes. We're able to do more robust risk assessments. I would say the risk scoring. So more and more auditors are looking for that risk ranking of your suppliers, and it's very easy to do in TraceGains. It's a very important piece that we're able to get using the supplier management module. Again, centralized system, so our entire organization can access that versus having documents scrolled away in permission controlled file drives. Easy approvals and rejections. And I think the most impactful thing as we sort of look at the qual time and where we really are hoping to have more success in the future is when suppliers engage in TraceGains. When you have your information there, when you have it available to customers, sort of at the drop of a hat, we've been able to significantly reduce the time it takes us to qualify you and the items we're buying from you. So we've basically been able to take qual time from 3 to 6 months in some cases down to about 14 days. So about 2 weeks versus several months. It's been a huge impact on the organization and allowed us to get to market faster with new concepts and new dosage forms that we've been developing. So overall, we know we'll continue to give preference to suppliers using TraceGains just because we know we can simply complete the process faster. And then I'd just like to end here with a few I would say Market Hub must-haves or a few reminders about Market Hub. I think they're what we've heard from our suppliers, what's Market Hub? I don't think that's really useful for us, but I want everybody to know our QA and strategic sourcing teams are using Market Hub nearly every day. And so to wrap up again, just a few reminders. First and foremost, TraceGains is not just a platform for quality. Quality folks, if you're thinking this, please let your sales and marketing team know you're using TraceGains because you really have a free sales and marketing tool at your fingertips, which will then could alleviate some pain points when it comes to providing documentation later. You can proactively load those catalogs, things like that. As you're setting up supplier groups, consider all locations, items, and contacts that should be included. We've seen some locations don't necessarily want to talk to one another, so maybe one location's using it because one customer required it, so they don't know if supplier groups are already established. And then when setting up items, I don't know what item 14697 is. I'd love to memorize product catalogs, but if you can include a robust description, it's super helpful. It helps us find those items in Market Hub and helps connect with you. Also, if your organization allows, if you can include basics and basic documentation about the items you're loading. I listed a couple examples here of something we may be looking at, but it's important to do that because it helps with some of those preliminary R&D looks, right? So to see if that's worth our need and will meet our needs and whether or not we should kind of pursue it further. Your contacts should at minimum include a sales and quality contact. I think sales, you don't want to field quality emails, and quality, you don't want to field sales emails. So just make sure you're including both. And I guess, my last point is really to work with your customer to determine if any custom items should be visible in Market Hub. Some of your customers may not want those custom items, custom blends, custom ingredients, custom products made visible to Market Hub. So definitely work with your customers as you're loading those items to clarify whether or not it should be visible. And with that said, I will turn it back over to James for some final thoughts.
Great, good stuff. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was fabulous. It's really fun to hear the journey as far as how you guys decided to choose to partner with TraceGains, some of the things that you've seen successful. So some just quick tidbits, continuous improvement in the area of sourcing. As Sarah said, get people involved, see how you can do different things to make your life easier when it comes to finding, whether it's new ingredient suppliers, secondary, tertiary type suppliers, things of that nature. And then the other major point is just Market Hub. It's grown by leaps and bounds, as you saw in Gary's keynote earlier. And the reality is it's really, really nice for our customers to go out and source and have that data to know that they're going to approve those suppliers quicker and those items quicker. But it's also really, really nice for those ingredient suppliers to upload their catalog of ingredients and documents and information, because I can tell you more and more customers are starting to use TraceGains to source new ingredients, and that's not going to slow down any. So if you're a supplier, you want to make sure you have all of your information correct and up to date. And with that, we'll pass it on over to Jared Kiefer to learn a little bit more about URM, how they've implemented, and kind of getting a little feel for their successes. So Jared, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, James. It was great hearing some insight from you in Nature's Way. I really appreciate it. Today, I'm going to talk about onboarding and rollout. We'll cover setting strategy, supplier onboarding, and adaptation learning. First, let me tell you a little bit about URM so you can get an idea of our platform and why we use it. So we are a co-op located in Spokane, Washington. We serve about 240 retail stores in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. We have multiple lines of business. Our primary is retail and wholesale, but we also do food service. We have an insurance company. We do chemicals and point of sale IT equipment as well. So in TraceGains, we use it for approximately 2,000 product suppliers. As of today, it's 1,991. We have about 83,000 items in the system, and we do about 200 service suppliers, so our contractors and things like that. We are constantly onboarding and inactivating suppliers. So we like to think that we have great supplier relationships. And because of that, there is some initial hesitancy to jeopardize those relationships through a mandate to use TraceGains for document management. So this caused us to really thoughtfully evaluate our supplier onboarding processes, objectives, and interactions. And so let's dive right on into that. So first off, visioning out your entire process can help give you a clear picture of how the organization onboards suppliers. And then I'll vision out what you want that process to be. A lean approach is great for this. Do not limit your scope to just your department. Include other departments who share roles in supplier onboarding. There's procurement, IT, operations, accounting. Doing this will give you a comprehensive picture and potentially allow you to assess your onboarding opportunities. Gather your internal partners. Chances are your program will impact just more than you. Discuss your vision with your other business units that touch suppliers. In those conversations, pay attention to their problems. You may be able to help solve them. If you do see an opportunity, integrate those into your process. Once you've done that, move on to leadership. Get them to buy into your vision. Starting with the other business units is purposeful, even if there are no opportunities to incorporate their needs into the process. When leadership discusses this program with others, your potential partners will have already been exposed to the info, and leadership will hear a consistent message about the benefits of your onboarding process. Keep in mind, you do have external partners as well. Leverage those where appropriate. They can be really helpful. Your brokers, buyers, distributors. Think about how the system would impact them and your suppliers. Put yourself in their shoes. Think about how they would benefit. Use those benefits in outreach material too. That you're given to your suppliers. External partners can be good go-betweens and advocates for you and your needs. Finally, think about things that'll make it easier for your supplier to connect and submit docs. As much as possible, reduce or eliminate the hurdles that stand in the way of your suppliers doing what you would like them to do. For example, set up your communication documents up front. Anticipate your supplier needs and questions, whether FAQs, step-by-step instructions, TG training, etc. Also give hard thought to those initial documents that you want from suppliers. You may be able to prioritize those that are absolutely necessary and then move on to other documents later. So at URM, we took this goal and we met with 8 different departments that had a role in supplier onboarding and maintenance. We found immediate opportunities in 4 of those departments. We then collaborated with those employees and developed new supplier onboarding procedures and incorporated their document needs into TraceGains. We pitched those changes to the department heads, and they were quite enthusiastic. We then took any suggestions that leadership had and refined the process further. Then we pitched it to the exec team, gained their support for our vision, which ultimately developed not just to a food safety document management system, but an overall effective document management system for all URM suppliers. Now, there will be hiccups. Not everything will fall in line as expected. Think about how you want to handle this ahead of time. Sometimes you will need to adapt. Sometimes the supplier will need to adapt. However, always focus on the goal. Adapt when you need to achieve your goal. There's not one straight path to where you want to go. While there are a number of objectives, such as reducing risk, developing partners, clearly communicate, this all leads us to our ultimate goal and objective for this process: simplify and amplify. Use multiple strategies and adjust your interactions accordingly to facilitate compliance. If you got to, use the partner role, use the heavy-handed role, use the, hey, I'm just the messenger role or the salesperson role, whatever. Ultimately, your supplier has to buy into the process. If not, the whole thing falls apart, either in connection or in maintenance. Set your expectations from the beginning to your suppliers. Clear expectations communicated to the suppliers and your internal partners as well can do much of the work for you. Lots of self-answered questions or questions answered by your partners. Remember those support documents that we built up? Now is the time to put them in front of your suppliers. Use them liberally. FAQs, setup guides, SOPs, process steps, doc requirements, use them. Also, let them know about TraceGains Academy. Make it easy for your partners to access the information that they need. This reduces their barriers to entry. You should, when you're onboarding, anticipate some extra handholding. Leverage your TraceGains partners to assist as needed. In particular, TraceGains Academy will help with training, and they can do it on demand as they choose. Also, use your customer success manager. Your CSM knows the system and can greatly assist with getting them connected. Ultimately, responding quickly to your suppliers helps keep that momentum going. They're engaged when they reach out. Don't let that dissolve. Often you get the results that you're looking for a lot quicker. Establish your onboarding objectives based on your needs, whether they're reducing risk, prioritizing certain documents, connections, audit requirements. For us, the program objective was to reduce risk, but our onboarding objectives were to connect the suppliers first, get them in the system, get them in the environment, then approve them. At URM, we include all of our suppliers in TraceGains. We have the same onboarding process for food, non-food, service suppliers. This includes health and beauty care items, OTC drugs, paper products, toys, anything you would find in a grocery store. That said, food product suppliers were prioritized at rollout for us, and they're still prioritized today. Most of our metrics are geared towards that priority. We did this for a couple of reasons. These suppliers were seen as the highest risk for us in our business, and they would generally be more familiar with document sharing platforms and systems. We also prioritize document requirements based on business risk. Supplier docs first, and then we move on to item docs. We do this because items come and go faster in our business than suppliers. So if we didn't prioritize supplier docs, we'd be chasing the item docs indefinitely. At rollout, we sent a letter from our CEO to all suppliers announcing the program requirements. This letter is still used in our supplier policies. We set a zero tolerance policy from the CEO on down for connection and document submission. During our rollout, we halted relationships with approximately 170 suppliers as a result of this policy. Today, we don't even onboard a supplier without a connection and document submission. We also leveraged that letter to be a marketing document as well. We took the opportunity to tell our suppliers why they should choose to participate and how using TraceGains can help them manage their own supplier and customer documents. Our initial timeline objective was to get 95% of our food suppliers connected into TraceGains within 90 days. Which leads us right into adapt and learn. So not all suppliers will do what you ask initially. Know when to be firm and when to stick to your ultimatum, and know when to deviate from the status quo. Be clear with your internal leadership on this, and everyone needs to be on the same page. There may be some suppliers that you do not want to press the issue with. Offer them alternatives to compliance. At URM, we hit some resistance from market leaders, and you can't not offer market leader products, right? But you can shift to other branded items, or ultimately they understood our desire and need for documents, but many have multi-tiered structures for documents, like legal departments were instantly involved. So we had to develop strategies to get the information that we needed outside of TG. This usually was email. But once we get that information, we always put it into TraceGains for tracking and management. You will hit hurdles: wrong contact information, bad emails, supplier personnel changes, different supplier departments responsible for different information. Be aware of that and plan for that. There are solutions to anything you'll encounter. We have found the most effective solution to this is just to have a conversation with them. We all want to conduct business and move forward. Starting from that point and asking, how do we get to that goal together, can accomplish a lot. Early on, we would frequently get responses such as, I don't know what these documents are, or could you be more specific as to what you're looking for? As a result, emails were still needed to send like NDAs, continuing guarantees, and some insurance docs. But to better address this, we leveraged TraceGains and put those document examples and templates into the supplier document request so that when the supplier sees that, they have those examples and templates immediately available in front of them. As you gather knowledge, use it to inform your decision. Always practice continuous improvement. This document example is one of them. Another is that we shifted our connection objective to within 6 months, as 90 days was just unrealistic. We then used that time to leverage other business units to assist in getting suppliers to connect by them contacting their connections. Remember that internal marketing? This is where it pays off. Additionally, all of our partner departments have visibility into TraceGains. When we rolled out the process, we had them approve their own documents. We decided that we needed to simplify that process further from that multiple approvals to just one department. So now one department does the approvals for everything, and it really sped up the onboarding process. Finally, we took this opportunity to update all of our business documents, such as product guarantees, NDAs, and our insurance standards. To the last bullet point, keep track of your metrics and objectives. This will help reinforce your process and keep your internal partners engaged. Communicate those metrics. If you're not meeting your goals, own it. Develop some solutions and ask for assistance if needed. To this end, we track our metrics weekly. We also share our program information monthly to internal department heads, and then execs receive quarterly updates. So I thought I'd give you you guys some insight into our onboarding metrics. So here's our 6-month onboarding when we rolled the system out. At our 6-month goal, we had 92% of our food suppliers were connected or approved. And then to the right, we've got our status today. Today, we have 96% of our food suppliers are connected or approved. And overall, that number is 92% for all of our suppliers across the board. And that's it for me. James, take it away.
Thanks, Jared. Really good stuff, and appreciate learning a little bit about how URM went about evaluating TraceGains, but really delivering it, right? So a few takeaways: you need to be flexible, and then you also need to set expectations. I think that's a really unique point that a lot of companies, when they license TraceGains and jump on board with TraceGains, we do our best to make everybody successful in the system. But at the end of the day, it's also really good for the customer who's using our software to set the right expectations and try to meet goals. And I think that's important. And then the last takeaway that just came to my head, because you had mentioned it earlier, is really the fact that, you know, we always say this, the supplier management system is really only as good as suppliers interacting with it. And I think when you have a focus on that, it really helps, you know, launch the product and so on and so forth. So thank you very much, Jared. Good stuff. Appreciate it. Hope everyone found some value there. Next, we're going to go to Kelly Surprise. And Kelly's going to go into a little bit about, you know, risk analysis and kind of leveraging the tool and so on and so forth. So Kelly, take it away. Looks like you're on mute, Kelly.
All right, sorry about that. I'm Kelly Surprise. I'm coming to you as former supply chain quality manager, working with milk and whey products in the past. And I really loved digging into the TraceGains platform because it really gave me the opportunity to do some really deep dives in the risk assessment process. But as far as strategy goes, if I was going to recommend this tool, I would say that there's 6 things for supplier programs that I'd really have you focus on for supplier strategy. We all know we have to do hazard analysis for raw materials, right? But more importantly, take that information from your suppliers, and also don't forget to go to your process. So for example, I'd have you really focus on any process applications, like after your heat kill step. Don't forget that step, but also use the TraceGains tool for the hazard analysis and pull it all together. I'm really excited about the risk evaluation piece because it's so configurable. You can set up color codes, and you can see on the screen to the right that I've got color codes set up for the different risks. You might have high risk being red, orange for the medium risk, and low risk. Those are some really great features that it offers. I was able to pull together the food safety team from multiple plants, and I would highly suggest you do this ahead of setting it up for the organization as a whole. I think this collaboration and setting it up correct will get the buy-in up front, and then you'll be more successful with this process. On the next slide, there's 3 additional pieces for the supplier programs that FSMA wants us to cover. And you can do all 6 of these with the exception of the supplier corrective actions using just the supplier management module. So I would highly recommend you add on the audit and or the quality modules to utilize the supplier corrective action features as well. This helps us to hold our suppliers accountable. And as both Jared and Sarah mentioned, if you don't have that agreement up front, you're not firm in saying, here's what we need, and you don't have that performance to use, you can collect that data over time and then show it to them and hopefully improve their quality over time. The next point, number 5, importer of record. I would challenge you to deeper dive into the importer of record piece, because I know that with FSMA, they allowed us to do unknown for importer of record for the first 6 months. So that window's passed now. And when I was at my former company, I started digging into this a little bit, going, we have some distributors here, and understanding your contracts and those relationships, it's really important. But you can set up your dashboards in the TraceGains tool for success, and to be able to show these and use the gearboxes and drill down and really see and show a quick picture for your audits and your customer visits. And last but not least is the approved suppliers list itself. That's the easy one. You can just open up the supplier tab and show it, and you can see on the right here, I've got, again, approved, unapproved, all the various statuses to show that requirement for FSMA. So that's an easy check the box. Other strategies you might consider with the dashboards, and you can see with the arrow to the right, I have all these dashboards created in the demo site for TraceGains that I like to show. And it's your approved suppliers list. You might show an audit plan, so your high-risk suppliers and what your plan is to audit, because that's always a key point during audits, whether it's compliance audits or customer audits. Also the FSVP compliance piece. You can, for example, use the dashboard and pull all your international suppliers all in one list, and then dig into those specifically by item or material or country of origin. And that's a huge data mining capability, which is the next point, that when you're filling out your customer questionnaires, for example, you can go into these dashboards and quickly drill down and see, oh, here are the suppliers that are halal certified for this ingredient, for example. You might look at, here are all my allergens that are related to eggs in another dashboard. And here are all my certificates, halal, kosher, examples like that. And then the next piece is, it is so automated. You can set up workflows with your dashboards that it will automatically trigger color changes or approval status changes. It'll send emails to your internal customers so that you can get the workflows completed for faster approvals. And then as far as the FSMA compliance, again, you can use the dashboards to show all the FSMA compliance requirements that I covered in the first 6 points. Just to reiterate that, you can configure your dashboards specifically for color code to show things that you want to highlight internally, and that can be user specific as well. I just want to mention. So for example, if you don't want to show that to an auditor, oh, these ones are all my high risk ones, but you want to have a site specific setup, you can set them up by user as well. It's very friendly as far as scoring. You can change your configuration with risk assessment. As I mentioned earlier, I pulled a team of food safety people together to set up the criteria. So you can change the criteria in the out of the box to something that's more business smart for your organization. And then last but not least, I like to use these dashboards also to have the annual HACCP and preventive control meetings. It's a really quick, here's what we had last year, here's what changed. You can pull up these lists and it makes your meetings run really efficiently, and then use that documentation as part of your SQF or whatever certification that you have to show the records for that, print them out or whatever you need to do. And then the last thing that I'm really excited about, that's something really new that I didn't get to dig into in my former company, was the smart alerts. I was really looking for which organizations to sign up to, you know, the FDA alerts and things like that. But now TraceGains offers it all in the one platform, so that you can just go in there. You can go in there every day, or you can set it up where, you know, you have a workflow that's every month and it kicks out something. So I really love that feature. And I think if you have any questions related to that, James can cover that. And last slide is the reporting feature. Related to smart alerts, you can set up reports so that you can show auditors for compliance that you are pulling certain warnings up for those items, and then you can dig into supplier corrective actions, for example, for anything that's red, might be your high risk ones or warnings, however you like to set those up. But then you can take that information and document that in your review and what you did with that, and that would be great to show inspectors. That's all I have. Any other questions?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly. It's good to learn a little bit about how our users have implemented TraceGains. So I think a few takeaways, that what we've had just from your portion is really kind of start with the out of the box reporting and risk analysis. TraceGains has built in a lot of these user defined dashboards that have these reports already built out, that once you start getting forms and getting info from your suppliers are going to start populating. That being said, those aren't locked down. And so we love it when customers come up with new and unique ideas to look at risk and things of that nature. And then, we can learn from that. We can share that with other customers. We can help others in the industry. And then, as you guys know, the data is critical. It's not just having the forms or the documents. It's really the idea of leveraging this data, whether it's, building out that allergen dashboard or, a site-specific risk dashboard and things of that nature. So those are really some high-level takeaways that we have at TraceGains for your portion. And, with that, I think we'll kind of open it up for a few questions. I know we're running up against the clock, so we didn't really have a lot of time. So, what I really want to encourage people to do is connect with Kelly or Jared or Sarah and learn a little bit about maybe some of the things that they did, or how they look at things, or some successes that they've had. And maybe you can use that too as you roll out TraceGains and you need some tips and tricks. So you can connect with them in the conversations portion of the TGCon website. And I think that might be good for everybody to set that up. Also, while we have a few minutes here ending, I would still highly encourage everyone to fill out the poll and answer those poll questions. That would be great as well. And it looks like we have one question that came in just now, and it's from, I hope I get this right, Sagar, and it's for Kelly specifically. Risk assessment's great evaluation tool. The issue I foresee is unified risk score for both supplier and ingredients. Presently, categorization in two broad areas, supplier risk assessment and ingredient risk assessment, which may have limitation if a supplier is supplying both high risk and low risk ingredients. Kelly, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, you can definitely set it up to be supplier and item specific, so that is not an issue. It's very configurable.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Another question came in from Justin Cardoza. Justin asks Sarah, when reverting from custom questionnaires to TG standard questionnaires, how did you deal with items that remained key to Nature's Way expectations? Did you develop a second form to capture the non-standardized items?
That's a really great question. There is some level of customization. I will say though, it's a small fraction compared to what it was before trace gains, before we started using some of the standard TG forms. You know, we've also tried to really be a voice with, working with trace gains to try to get some of those questions we felt should have been included in some of the TG forms long term, because we really felt they were important. And we've seen now more and more as they make updates to those TG standard forms that more and more of those questions are getting incorporated. So yeah, there's still going to be sort of one-off type requests we're going to need on certain items or from certain suppliers, and we're handling those as those come. But we're really trying to be disciplined and stay standard TG and only go off script when really necessary.
Good stuff, good stuff. And yeah, I'll bring up that point. I mean, I hear that a lot out in the field when chatting with companies looking to explore trace gains. And the reality is we've done a lot of work with our users over the years to get these forms to where it can be pretty much standard across the board. We don't want to create a world where everyone has their own custom questions, even though when you look at one questionnaire versus another, they're basically asking the same questions. However, they're in different orders and so on. We know that it's a continuous journey. And we understand that regulations change, and we need to continually make sure that we're adding relevant questions. And then we also obviously offer the flexibility when needed for companies to create what we call addendums to those forms, so that again, you can get all the pertinent information when looking at risk, when evaluating your suppliers, and when evaluating your items. So if you have any questions on how to create addendums, or if you want to be a part of maybe an advisory group that deals with some of these forms, reach out to your customer success manager. They'd be more than happy to help you along that journey or show you how to do some unique things. Let's see here. It looks like, and David Guillen, who heads up our TG Academy, also just reminded me that there is a course on standard online form addendums in the TG Academy. So again, that should always be your first stop if you want to learn something. There might be a quick video or a quick dialogue around how you can do that. So looks like we're up against it. So I just want to finally remind everybody again about the polls. Please take the polls. And then also there's a survey that's going to be sent your way after this meeting to give us some feedback. How can we do better? How can we continue to provide value for all of the users and attendees here? And also, how we can, continue to improve TGCon. This has been a long journey. I've actually been to every single TGCon, and obviously pretty unique this year, but it's exciting to get everybody together. And so with that, I'll just finish off by saying thank you very much to everybody on this panel, Kelly and Jared and Sarah. Really fun to learn a little bit about your insights, your journey, your companies, and I want to also thank everybody who attended the session today. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great rest of TGCon Live today and tomorrow. I know AJ's session tomorrow is going to be great, talking about new and exciting enhancements. So thanks again, stay safe, and look forward to connecting with everybody, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.